Know when you're ready. Well, welcome everyone. It's wonderful to see you. Thanks so much. I see lots of familiar faces and even a couple of new faces, which is great. I think there'll be a few people keep showing up here as we get started, and that's fine because today what we're doing is it's fine if folks drop in because it's a workshop. Becky Bowen, who is with NC State Extension, very generously has been helping us out over the past several months. She provided a workshop. Originally, I think that first one was back in October, if I'm remembering correctly, and she provided a lot of good content for us. Oh, I'm having an echo. Let me see if I can get that straight. If everybody can turn off their audio. Susan, can you make sure?
Terry, you need to unmute.
Okay, there we go. Thank you. And Susan, am I a co-host? I was trying to get to everybody's audio. Okay, for some reason I wasn't seeing that. Thank you. Okay, hopefully that helped. Hopefully the echo is gone. So as I was saying, Becky graciously provided a really good workshop for us back, I think in October, and with a lot of great content that we were able to record and share for those who missed it. And then also in the meantime, several of you had said it would be helpful to have a template. And fortunately, Becky she reviewed one of our community centers who had fairly recent bylaws, and she reviewed those, made some suggested edits and everything. And that way we have a template that we were able to provide you. And that was sent out a few times over the past few months. And it was actually attached to the email I sent you this morning that had this link and reminder about this. So if you didn't notice that, you can go back and look at that. So that just gives you something that is from another community center that Becky has vetted, and you can use that as a template with that. Today really is about your burning questions for Becky. And I'm gonna let Becky do an introduction, tell you a little bit more about herself, about this, and then we'll just get started with some of your specific questions and just work through those. So Becky?
Great. Thank you, Terry and Susan, and it's good to see all of you again. I hope that you found the presentation back in the fall helpful, and then the follow-up with the use of a possible template as well. Terry said that I'm not to make a presentation, so I'm not going to make a presentation. I'm here to answer your questions. A little bit more about me. I am a community economic development specialist at NC State Extension. I am also an attorney, and I have a lot of experience with nonprofit organization and development. And that is why I believe Ross and Steve suggested that Terry and Susan reach out to me, because I've been in both Buncombe and Madison counties talking about primarily how to sort of reinvigorate some community nonprofits that may be getting a little stagnant. So anyway, I'm here to answer your questions. I know that Terry communicated to me that there was some confusion about my discussion of member versus non-member nonprofits. So the answer to that will depend on what your bylaws say and your articles, but I'll just open it up to questions now.
Thank you, Becky. And just so everyone knows, I'll let you know also, Ross Young, who is Extension and worked with the communities in Madison, is also with us, and Steve Duckett, who is Extension Director in Buncombe County and works with the communities, is also with us, in addition to Becky, myself, and Susan. So you have several resources here for your questions. So And we'll just go ahead. Who has a question? I think Paul, I believe you're ready to go. Okay.
Sure. I want to thank you for the template. That was very helpful. I don't know why I missed it earlier, but I did read it this morning, went over it several times. And the pathway to membership by attending community meetings, 2 of them, and then being able to vote like during the annual meeting at the end of the year. That answered a lot of questions for me here. One difficulty that the Greater Ivy Citizens Community Center has faced in the past, roughly say 10 to maybe 15 years, is that the group that launched GICA, this association, was very energetic, and they were committed to establishing the community center, and they actually raised money, had it built, and then did the shrubbery planting and monitored the use of the gym and the building basically. Well, over the years, a lot of that transferred over to the county to pick up. And so, and I won't say and so, but along the way then, well, kind of the evolution of it passed. And the leadership at that time either disconnected, some of them passed away, and that kind of thing. And so at this point, over the past roughly, say, 6 to 8 years or so, it's been difficult even to get board members. And so the following, the community support, the community connections that used to be there are gone. And so what I'm realizing through reading the template and just thinking further, what needs to happen is basically rebuild those community connections. And then from that, be able to have them become part of decision-making by being involved, by attending events that happen. And so the events that have come to mind so far are more kind of educational, informational. We are into a creek restoration process here, which is becoming kind of the key theme at this point. And so there's a lot that could be learned. I'm learning personally a lot about that kind of thing. So at any rate, I guess I'm just sharing with you kind of what's happened, and basically that some of the questions that I've been kind of mulling over have been resolved. So just sharing that.
Great. That I'm glad that your questions have been resolved, Paul. I do want to respond to some of the ideas that you're suggesting. And basically, you're wanting to rebuild the organization, and so I certainly suggest that the current membership, the current board, undertake a strategic planning process, which would, certainly identify what the organization's mission is. If there are any special projects, you mentioned creek restoration is really bubbling to the top. Really take a look and make sure that your membership and board are all in agreement and have that common goal. And then it is a matter of marketing. It is a matter of getting the word out that this is who you are. This is what you stand for. This is what you plan to accomplish in the next 1 to 3 years. And then I would also encourage you to engage the youth of the community as much as you can. So, and get them involved in any projects that you have. And actually, maybe they don't have a vote under your bylaws, but certainly include them in committee work, have them attend meetings, listen to what they have to say in the meetings. All of that should help regenerate your organization.
Okay. Just to comment on part of that, part of your suggestion is that we've got the high school involved in doing the creek study, and they're very excited. It's become integral to the biology department there. So so that's a good launch already. So there's a lot of things in play. It's an interesting time, but like, again, just kind of thinking about connecting to the community. What I described a moment ago is clearer about just what lies ahead there. It definitely broadens my responsibilities, but I can see where it's needed. So thank you.
And, and another thing that, some organizations can do is create a special class of membership within the organization for youth. They don't have voting rights, but, whatever other benefits you would like to provide to them, you just outline that in your bylaws.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thanks for that update, Paul. That's exciting to hear about the good work that's going on and that you have youth from your local high school involved in that creek restoration. Thanks for sharing all that.
Oh, you're welcome.
Oh, that sounds really positive. Evelyn, did you have some specific questions?
Well, I would like to comment on what Mr. Smith said. Our organization, due to COVID primarily, because we didn't meet for over a year, we've just started meeting in person again, but our numbers are definitely down, and that's very concerning. One of our members, Mike McLean, uses, he and his wife operate a mailing newspaper, a mailer that goes out every month. So he had access to all of these the zip code information. We've decided to send out a mailer, which is not that expensive. We're going to narrow it down to strategic areas that we think are closer to Bethel than outlying areas. And we're going to send a mailer, just, give them some of our basic information and our website information. Also, we're considering having a little printout in some of the local churches to let people know that we are here and some of the things we do, because, we feel like we're in a rebuilding stage too. Some of our members are still afraid to come back because of COVID, and I understand that, but our attendance is definitely down at meetings. And I did not get a chance to read the bylaws that you sent, the template, but I will do that. But a question I have, and I think Mr. Smith alluded to this, is how in the world do you get people to step up? Some of us are getting plumb worn out, and the same people are doing the same things over and over again. And I know you say term limits on your board members, but what if you can't get other people to step up to the plate,
Yeah, and what I would suggest is a lot of people, if they haven't had any experience with your organization, may be reluctant to assume a board position immediately. So, one way to get non-board members or non-members involved is through committees, and that's a matter of reaching out to different groups. And Terry, you may be more familiar with how to strengthen the engagement piece, but I think outside of the box, think outside of who has typically been involved, and think about who you might involve who's new and might bring a different perspective and different energy, and then invite them to work on a committee. So they don't have to be a member in order to work on the committee. You just have them there so that they can learn more about your organization. So, it's kind of a test run. Just invite them to to come and see what you're doing.
And we do have a strong committee structure. I mean, everything we do is based on committee work. What I noticed in your previous seminar, you talked about limiting the number of standing committees. How many is too many? What are the basic ones that you should have?
It really depends on, what the history of committees is with your organization. There's no requirement under the law that you have certain committees, but, typically there is a recruitment committee. There may be a program committee. There would be a budget or finance committee. Some organizations have bylaws and governance committees, but I really think that at the stage of the mature stage that most of your organizations are, you're going to need to really focus on programming, strategic planning, and recruitment. So those would be, in addition to budget, those would be the committees that you should consider having.
And Ross and Steve, if you have anything to add to that for Evelyn, by all means, just jump in.
One thing I don't think I heard is just special events. That can be a good way to, to draw new folks into to the community center, and kind of, within that, just sharing some of the opportunities for involvement that are there. Some communities have had success with, kind of banding together around a community issue. And I mean, that could be like Paul talked about with stream restoration. You might have, one of our communities has had luck around, forest landowner issues, and that's drawn some people in. Food pantries, adding a, sort of a food pantry to a, certainly a remote area in a community. That's been a project that some folks have got behind. So there's not any one thing that I could suggest, but there's just a number of activities, and just like was said earlier, kind of thinking outside the box or addressing, those community issues, which are very, tend to be very unique to each community. I mean, there's probably no two that I work with that are exactly the same. So I'm sure Terry and Susan have an even broader experience with that, but that would be my 2 cents there.
Thank you, Steve. And Evelyn, back to the original part of your question with the bylaws, the reason that we recommend those rotation of board members is so that it kind of putting it in the bylaws really, it puts it at the forefront of your mind and almost forces you to do it, because it's very easy to not do that, right? And because you've got, just like you said, because you've got really good people, right, who are willing to do it. So it's much easier to just let those really good people continue to do it. And before long, you've had the same people in those roles for 20 years. And by putting it in the bylaws, it forces you to be thinking about it. It forces you to be thinking about, okay, like they said, thinking outside the box, thinking about, okay, who else can we recruit to bring in? And the good thing is in the bylaws, it does state, you put it in there to where if you're not able to get somebody, there's some flexibility for them to stay in that role until you do. So there's flexibility there, so you don't get yourself in a bind. But I do think it is important to push ourselves to think about, okay, well, who else? Because that's part of how I think you keep an organization revitalized, is that you're bringing in new ideas and new people. And so, and you can get them, just like Steve was saying, through some of these other activities. You get people involved, they're volunteering, and eventually somebody who might not have, if you had just asked them outright to be on the board, they might have said, no, I don't have that kind of experience, I don't want to do that. But given some time and understanding and work within your organization, then they're willing to step up and do that. And we've seen that work in different communities, and it's really great, because I think then people who may not realize that they have those skills then begin to realize that that is something they've developed, and that they have these skills that maybe they didn't realize in the past. And that's really beneficial, not only for that person, but for the community as a whole as well, because no community can rely on just one person, right? That's not a very strong community when you got one or even two or whatever. We need multiple people in the community stepping up and taking on those leadership roles.
Yeah, we did have one new board member that we were able to recruit. And we have a new president who is doing a great job. And
Wonderful.
so we were able to, I guess you'd say, finagle people into agreeing to do it this year, but it's not always easy.
I know. Well, thank you. And it's a great question. Thank you very much for bringing that up.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments.
How about John Humphrey? Did you have anything specific that you wanted to ask today? Oh, wait, you're on mute. Let's unmute you. Well, we'll come back to you, John, when you, because I know you're working on it there. Nancy Helms, did you have anything? Oh, there you go, John. Okay.
The biggest thing with Avery's Creek is that we are growing like crazy. All you have to do is drive through and you see multiple houses, apartments, all this kind of stuff going up everywhere, all over the community. And we used to be a farming community. We are no longer that. We have one dairy farm left in Avery's Creek. And industry is growing and houses are growing of this, and the roads are being changed, and just trying to keep up with that and get other people involved has been is something that, you know, is tough for us. And and the biggest thing we do, I guess, is rent our community center. And this past year, we didn't do very much of that because of all this COVID and other stuff going on. Now we have started to rent it more now, and but it's still, all you gotta do is, if you've never driven through Avery's Creek, you just drive through, you'll see all the changes that are going on all over the place here. And it just doesn't stop.
Yes.
So I'm wondering, John, if there would be an opportunity for your association to host an open event inviting all the new residents to come to learn about your organization and what the services are that the community service center provides. And that might be a way to, you know, get them to come to future meetings.
That might be a possibility or something. It's just, I mean, we've got our small little group that keeps going right now, and but
I think it's a great idea, Becky, because that way you could reach out to new people that, right, in all likelihood have no idea that you even have a community center there in Avery's Creek. And I think I found that a lot of new folks that move in, we saw this happen in Sandy Mush, a lot of those folks really love getting involved, and a lot of them were very interested in learning the history, and it made them feel more part of the community. So you all, John, if you decide to do that, you know, you might tell a little bit of the history of your community and those changes that you've talked about, how you went in a pretty short time, went from, like you said, a rural farming community to what is definitely no longer a farming community. And I think, you know, I think people that move in often, or at least a good amount of them, find something like that interesting too, and then may bring some new ideas to the community center too, of other types of things, help out with the things you're doing, as well as maybe have some ideas for some new things to get going.
Yeah.
I know that our Ox Creek community in Buncombe County, they've got a lot of new folks that moved into their community, and I think it's pretty much, we know COVID kind of limited everything, but they have a monthly potluck, and they specifically reach out and invite folks that have moved to the community and get them involved. And that seems to be really well received and appreciated. Let's see here. Does somebody else have a specific question? I can keep going around and calling, but raise your hand. You can just do like this if you had Alice. Alice and Gregory.
So our bylaws had not been redone since the inception of the organization, which was 20 years ago, roughly. And the bylaws were set up that the board, it was not a membership bylaws situation. So the board were the voting members. And it was a lifelong term. So last year, we did change the term limits and move them to 3 years. And so now we are realizing that bylaws should be looked at more than once every 20 years. We're realizing that, okay, we need to move toward the community members. And so there's the no community members, and then there's the all community members plus the board. Is there a hybrid, or do you just recommend jumping right in, or how do you see this as being not so much of a shock to the community?
Well, I think in the presentation, I listed some pros and cons of having a member-based organization versus one that isn't. So yours right now is just sort of a self-perpetuating association that you go out and you find new board members when the old board member terms are up. And you can continue to function that way. You can engage members of the community in programs and events, and even if you want them to serve on committees that board members serve on, you can do it either way. If you have a if you want to convert to a member-based organization where members are given specific legal rights, which typically include the ability to vote in new members, as well as to determine what happens with a major event to the organization, whether it dissolves or acquires a major asset or merges with another organization. Even amendments to bylaws in member-based organizations usually require a vote from the members to amend the bylaws. It's a lot simpler to run in an organization without those members, right? Because
Yes.
it's just the board, right? But it's a far more democratic organization and arguably more representative of the community if you do have a member-based organization. So the choice is really up to your organization on what they want to do. But I will say that you will, if you want to switch to a member-based organization, that's not just amending the bylaws. It requires an amendment to the articles themselves, which is not a big deal, but you should probably engage an attorney and make sure you do it right. So,
And Alice, I'll add. Oh, go ahead, Becky.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. The only other question is, I'm curious about everybody else. Do you all have a self-perpetuating board, or do you have community voting, or a mixture, or just curious what community centers actually do in Western North Carolina?
So we do a quick show of hands or vote on that? Like if you have a membership organization currently, raise your hand. And if you're not on video, if you go down on your screen where it says reactions, you can raise your hand. Click on that and then click on raise hand. So who has a member organization so far? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, at least half of us do. Oh, here's Carol McDaniel too. So there's 6. So over half of us have membership organizations already. Did
And
that answer your
Alice,
question, Alice?
Yeah, I'm just curious, is there one that's overwhelmingly better than other?
so Alice, let me add to that. I'd say that probably the majority of the community centers have member organizations, and it may be, I think the template we sent out with that, right? Your members are at least voting on your board. They're not voting on every single decision you're having to make. Now, you could set it up in that way if you wanted to, but I think with that template, basically what the membership was there to vote on was they got to have a say on who the board members were, right? Rather than the board members themselves just always voting for who they wanted on the board. They also, I think, like Becky said, when it came to dissolving, I believe that was in there. And I don't think I'd have to look back. I can't remember about amending the bylaws if they voted on that or not, but maybe so. Those seem to be like the main things that the members did. I'm not sure if there's any of the organizations that have a requirement that the members vote on every decision. But if you do any of you have, I'm sorry, what,
Typically
Becky?
not.
Yeah, that won't work.
Typically not,
Yeah,
because it's the role of the board to do the day-to-day operations.
yeah. Anyone else want to speak specifically to their membership and what Alice was asking? Because it sounds to me like what Alice is asking is they're considering, right? It's been done one way and they're thinking about now, should we change to a membership organization? So do any of you have any perspective on that or advice that you want to share from your perspective with your community center for Alice?
This
I
is
could,
Gregory. We are very much similar to Alice at Spring Creek. We have in our bylaws, which have not been adjusted since I think 2015 or so. So that is, I'm a co-chair, and one of the things, we are very busy. I'm at Pigeon Community Multicultural Development Center. And we are very, very busy. We have an after-school program. We have a summer enrichment program. We feed our seniors. We have Manna Foods, several things that involve our community. We are having a very difficult time with different volunteers, but we do have the same volunteers that continue to provide service for us. We do not, so that membership, we have membership listed on our bylaws, but we don't have any type of membership. And that is one of the things that we are trying to determine. We have a board members, and we have staff, and we have volunteers. So I am very interested also in advisory board and their role in a community center. So I still have that question of whether or not we need to consider having members. I do know that we have our center over the years was owned by Haywood County, and now it's owned by the community. And I don't know if that might be a reason for us to consider having membership since the community center is owned by the community.
Interesting. And so Gregory, when you say in your bylaws, so there's a section that speaks to members in your bylaws?
It does.
Okay, interesting. Sorry, Becky, go ahead.
Well, so if it's in your bylaws, then it also should say in the articles that that your organization has members, but you might want to double check that.
Okay.
The other thing is, assuming that you are a member-based organization and your bylaws say that you have members, then you should look to see how a member is defined. Make sure that your bylaws do specifically state who the members are. And we had a pretty robust discussion of membership at the presentation in the fall. And you know, one of the concerns is, well, if the membership is defined as anyone who lives in the neighborhood, and then they're unhappy, you know, they haven't gone to any meetings before, and then they show up at a meeting for a vote, and they're very vocal and unhappy or whatever. I think that the template shows that you can define more narrowly who your members are going to be by how active they are in your organization. So you really want to take a look at that.
Great. Currently, our membership states, the membership shall include all parties who share the visions of the organization and strives to support the organization or any of its program and activities. The membership shall be responsible for the care and maintenance of any property and or buildings of the organization and the enforcement of rules and regulations adopted by the organization. To me, that doesn't say really anything.
Yeah, it doesn't. It's platitudes.
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay. And what about advisory board? Any thoughts on whether or not a board or an organization should consider an advisory board?
Advisory boards can be very helpful to organizations in that they don't have an actual legal duty or fiduciary duty towards the organization or towards the membership. Instead, they are there in an advisory capacity. You know, it depends on your needs. If you feel like it would be important to have an advisory board comprised of a banker or a financial advisor, you know, someone you don't already have on your board. So those needs that you might have that aren't currently represented on the board that may have a particular expertise that you're in need of, then an advisory board would be good. But it's, you know, it's not absolutely necessary. It just depends on what your needs are.
Okay. Thank you.
These are great questions. Let's see, Nancy Helms, are you wanting to ask a specific question regarding the bylaws? No? Okay, you're on mute.
Okay.
Okay.
Great Creek, right now, we don't have a building to meet in. The building is under construction. And so we have not been able to meet in a little while. And we hope to start back to meeting in March. So then we'll go over whatever that, you know, the bylaws and get. And our president has been real sick. He has cancer. And so we're trying to find someone else to replace him. We've got a couple of people that'd be really good. So we're just hoping to, you know, go from there.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Nancy.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Now, was there anyone else that had a specific question? Nana or Judy, Chuck, Carol, any of you have any specific questions that you had for Becky regarding your bylaws? Okay, are the rest of you that already asked a question, you're welcome to ask another. Judy, there she is. No?
No, nothing to add.
Okay.
I appreciate the clarification. It's really helpful. And hearing the other people's questions is real helpful for me. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Gregory?
I thank you, Susan, for sending the link to the presentation that Becky gave back in October. Once I review that, who can I reach out to for support? because we're going to be working on our bylaws. And to me, it's going to be quite a daunting task. I'm probably going to recommend a committee as opposed to the entire board to work on them. But I know once we get started, having worked on other boards, doing strategic planning and working on bylaws and articles can sometimes be quite daunting. So I guess my question really is the support after when we actually start this.
So if you have some more specific questions around the bylaws, okay. So you could certainly email me and Susan, and we're hopeful that Becky will still be available
Okay.
to provide some support. So we know that her retirement, she let us know that she's thinking about retirement, but we're hoping not anytime in the next few months.
Great.
No,
Okay.
not in the next year.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, Paul.
I have a question about COVID. A number of you have indicated you haven't gotten together, with your board over the past year, maybe the past few months. We haven't either. Just when the thing started back, I don't know. It's been over a year for us as well. I've been keeping in touch with board members as things have flowed along with this, like the creek restoration process, and by way of email. And I'm pretty rigorous about that because I don't want to lose the connection, with people. But I'm leery about having people meet up just due to the contagiousness, especially of this current strand of COVID. And I'm just curious how the rest of you reasoned your way through in terms of taking the risk. I'll call it that, a risk, to meet up.
Great question. Gregory?
We have not stopped meeting. We have met on Zoom every month. We converted some of our activities. For instance, we have fish drives and fish fries and food drives. We converted those to outside. We have drive-throughs. They come and drive through to pick up their food instead of coming inside. Our Manna food drives, we have tents and they come outside. So we have not stopped meeting, and we actually had our planning and reflections meeting, which was a 6-hour long meeting, and we conducted that on Zoom.
Wow. Thank you.
And we've continued, we did not meet for the first 2 or 3 months, like March, April, May, or something like that of 2020. But the Spring Creek board went back to meeting in person, but we were either outside or we were in a gymnasium, and we were spread out throughout the gymnasium and had plenty of room. And the events that we've done are similar to Gregory's. They've been just about all outside. We've done car shows and fireworks and things like that that we could do outside. We're now considering what do we continue to do, and we don't have an answer.
Right. Okay.
One more thing I wanted to add, we are also ones that are very desperate for community involvement. And so our community center was just designated in last year as a historic place. And so we are getting ready in April of 2022 to have a huge outdoor gathering so that we can literally pull together. It was a school before that. Before desegregation, it was a Black elementary school. So we are literally sending out invites across the country once we do that to bring people together. And we hope that, and we also have a cemetery right across the street that is also a historic and Black cemetery. And we are looking to include that and do some research to get that designated as well. So the things that we are doing right now for community involvement really are about making those two places historic designations and then gathering people for an event. We've already published a book and we're looking to publish another book on the people in the community. So those are the kinds of things that we're doing right now to kind of involve our community.
Gregory, that sounds great. I'm really excited for you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
And I've said this at previous meetings that I've been with WNC communities and other places, that when we talk about volunteers, it really, it's hard, but it's simple. Because when I look at how I started becoming active with the Spring Creek Community Center, someone asked me. And so that's really what you do, is you identify your list of people that you feel strong about, and then you go after them. And that's really what you have to do. You know, it's simple, but it's hard.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that, Alice. Evelyn, I think you were wanting to share something.
Now, one thing we do, and some of you may do it too, that does help bring people in, we do try to have interesting speakers. We have 6 meetings a year. Every other month, we try to have speakers that really the community can relate to. Honest to goodness, the one that was the most exciting though was when we had a lady who runs a donkey farm. She brought 2 of her miniature donkeys, and that was the end of the meeting. Nobody wanted to listen to the meeting. They wanted to go out and pet the donkeys, but it did bring a lot of people in. And so bringing, you know, having a good speaker, we choose not to have controversial speakers if we can help it, ones that just give a lot of information or entertaining. We've had musicians, storytellers, but then we also have had nonprofit groups that come in and give their message. We did meet, our board met, except I think we missed maybe 1 or 2 meetings at the beginning of the COVID thing. And then we met at our community center. Fortunately, we only have 5 board members and we have 3 or 4 people who usually attend. But we spaced ourselves apart and everybody wore masks. We didn't require it, but people chose to. And then we had our regular meetings on Zoom, our membership meetings on Zoom. I wouldn't say they were super well attended, but at least we did keep that connection going. And we've started back with our membership meetings the last 2 times, I believe. And we've had the attendance is down by about half. You know, some people are still afraid to get out, but we leave it open to people to do what they feel comfortable doing. And we still have good speakers. So.
Thanks for
Just
sharing.
to build on what you said, Evelyn, you know, in terms of the groups of people who've been particularly hard hit by COVID are the entertainers. So the fact that, you know, you had some musicians come, you know, they're looking for gigs in any way that you can accommodate that particular sector is really hurting now, continues to be really hurt by the pandemic. So just keep entertainment in mind.
It's a great point, Becky. Yes. And one thing that this made me think of back to the bylaws is, so Paul and the rest of you, when you're thinking about that, when a lot of these bylaws were written, we didn't think about Zoom meetings, right? About needing to be able for the board to do business in some other way except in person. And so that's one thing that's in that template. If you'll look in there, we made sure there's wording in there that addresses that, because that's something that you do need. In all reality, you need to look at that and make sure I'm doing an addendum in your bylaws that you are providing your board another way to meet and conduct business besides just in person. So Becky, do you want to add anything to that point?
No, I think you're right, Terry. I mean, if you don't already have the ability to meet by electronic means written into your bylaws, you need to make sure that you do.
Gregory?
Yes, Gregory.
And again, I appreciate this information regarding the bylaws. I did have one other question that our community center is having a challenge with, and we wanted to ask that. And I just appreciate the opportunity to ask people who are in other community centers. We have board members who are also staff members. And it causes a bit of a rift, and we're trying to determine how to figure that out. Are there other community centers who have staff members who also serve as board members, or do you try to keep that separate?
That is a great question. I'll let them say, I think most of our community centers don't have staff. You're one of the fortunate ones,
Okay,
Gregory.
okay.
But Evelyn, I think, was going to share something.
Well, I was on another group. It was not a community center, but we did not let our staff be a part of the board.
Mm-hmm.
It makes it very hard to define their role, where their role differs from the board and so forth, and to supervise. So they were separate from the board. They attended board meetings and everything, but they really were not, did not have a vote on the vote. We felt like it was kind of a little bit
right.
of conflict of
That's
interest.
exactly right. That's exactly right, Evelyn. And those positions should be separate because the board is technically the boss of the staff, right? So sure, they come and they attend board meetings, but staff does not have a vote with respect to board votes.
Yeah,
So I was just going to suggest that perhaps you should clarify that in your bylaws.
Okay.
Since you are an organization that is able to hire staff, you have the funding to hire staff, and everything isn't just volunteers, that you should distinguish that and say that staff will not be considered for board positions.
Yeah, our executive director is having a real difficult time managing, and I'm trying to guide her, but we're kind of wrapped in right now. So we're having to try to detangle that because these board members, are also acting as staff. Okay, thank you.
Well, and equally important, I guess, to have a very strong conflict of interest policy that the board members sign off on annually because things change.
Yes.
Correct.
Yeah, great questions.
Just to give an example of that in the conflict of interest concept. So the staff is dependent on the organization to write their monthly check, right? They get paid by the organization. Yet the board has the job, the duty, the legal obligation to review the financials, and they may determine, you know what, we can no longer continue to afford, this many staff positions. So imagine if a staff member is a board member, that's a conflict right there.
All right, we've got four or five more minutes. Does anyone else have another question here while we have Becky's brain with us, providing us all this good knowledge? Well, wonderful. I really enjoyed this conversation today. There were great questions. It was wonderful to hear the various feedback from the communities. I know that you all appreciate hearing from each other as well as Becky. It's great having Becky's legal expertise and all that. And then it's also wonderful to hear from each of your communities because that's how we learn and grow as well from each other. So thank you all. And I'm really glad, Susan, that we did record this because I think there's a lot of really good content on here for others who weren't able to join us today. So Susan will send out the template again to the bylaws, as well as this, and probably attach that presentation that Becky first did for anybody who missed that. So they'll have all that context and can hopefully utilize all this good information. Hope you all have a wonderful, oh, and Susan is putting something in the chat to remind everybody about our next coffee hour in February. Susan, do you want to give a little plug for it? What's the subject on that one? Do you know?
Yeah, we are gonna have, well, I'm completely blanking. That's so embarrassing. Wow. I know what it is, but I can't think of it at the moment. So just watch your email.
Somebody click on the link and I bet it will tell us.
A link.
But the good thing is that we have these. is it-
Marie Whitener of Leicester Community. Center.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
she's going to be talking about all of their wonderful food programs. They've got a welcome table and a farmer's market that's brand new, and then the kind of the usual stuff with manna, but they've been doing it a long time, and I think they've probably got it down to a fine art. So
Wonderful. So if any of you all have an idea of something, a best practice that your community does that you would like to share during our coffee hour, please reach out to Susan, because the communities are really enjoying these and we'd like to change it up each month. We're doing these each month with different content. And so if you have something that's you or someone in your community would like to share, we would love to have you reach out to us. So thank you all very much. It was great to see you. Thank you, Becky. Thank you. Thank you. And we will keep going. And I appreciate you all doing this great work for your communities.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.